Okay, so we're diving into something pretty interesting today. Leadership changes. They don't always make headlines.
Right.
But in a region like East Africa, well, when the East African community gets a new chairperson, that can really shift the landscape.
Absolutely.
You're probably familiar with the EAC, at least in broad strokes.
Mm.
7 nations in East Africa,
Yeah.
Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, Uganda, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They're all working together, trying to build stronger ties, boost their economies.
It's a really dynamic region.
It is, and they've just elected a new leader to guide that process, William Ruto, Kenya's president.
And this isn't just some, ceremonial handover. The EAC chairmanship, it carries real weight.
Oh, yeah?
Think about it. This person sets the agenda for the entire community.
Yeah.
They decide what issues get tackled first, what projects get the funding, even how the EAC interacts with the rest of the world.
So Ruto's not suddenly, like, the king of East Africa, but he's definitely in a position to steer the ship.
Exactly. He's got a lot of influence, a lot of potential to make a real impact.
So what kind of captain is he likely to be? What's his style?
Well, from what we've seen so far, Ruto's a man with a plan, and it's a pretty ambitious one. He's laid out 4 key areas he wants to focus on during his time as chair.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for me. What's at the top of his list?
Number 1, boosting trade and investment.
Makes sense.
He wants to see fewer barriers between these EAC nations. Less red tape, smoother regulations. He's even talked about pushing for cross-border trade deals.
You really make it easier to do business across East Africa?
Exactly.
Sounds promising, especially if it can bring in more investment and create jobs. A stronger economy benefits everyone, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? That ties right into his second priority, promoting peace and security.
Right.
Ruto's been very clear that he sees stability as the bedrock of economic growth. No one's going to invest in a region that's constantly in turmoil.
That's true. But achieving peace and security in East Africa, that's a tall order, given the region's history.
It is definitely a challenge, but it's one that Ruto seems determined to tackle. Now, his third goal is driving economic growth. But he's not talking about just any kind of growth. He wants to see those nations move beyond just exporting raw materials.
Oh, I see. So less about digging things out of the ground and more about actually adding value, transforming those resources.
Exactly. He's talking about building up local industries, boosting manufacturing, creating more wealth within East Africa itself.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, what's the fourth one?
Now, his fourth priority is where things get really interesting. He wants to push for a political confederation.
A what?
It'd be a step towards a single, unified East African political entity.
Whoa, hold on. A United States of East Africa. That's a massive goal.
Yeah.
We're talking about 7 different countries, each with their own unique history, culture, political systems.
It's a bold vision, no question. But to really grasp why this is such a big deal, we need to unpack what this chairmanship really means. How much power it actually gives Ruto.
Okay, let's dive into that. I'm curious how much influence he actually has to make all this happen.
So the EAC chairmanship, it's not about one person calling all the shots.
Right.
It's more about using influence to guide the community towards a shared goal.
Okay, I'm listening. Paint me a picture.
Think of it this way. The chairperson is like a facilitator, someone who builds consensus. They set the agenda for those big EAC summits. They can prioritize certain issues over others. And they play a key role in shaping how the EAC interacts with the rest of the world, representing them on the global stage.
So it's a balancing act. Ruto needs to be persuasive to get those other leaders on board with his vision.
He can't just force his agenda. He's got to build consensus, find common ground. And that's where the real challenge lies, especially with these ambitious goals.
So yeah, the chairmanship gives him a platform, a voice, but it doesn't guarantee everyone's going to fall in line.
Not at all. In fact, there are some serious potential roadblocks that could stand in Ruto's way. But before we get into those, let's zoom in on what exactly his vision entails. Let's start with that intriguing idea of a United States of East Africa. Now, this United States of East Africa idea, it's not totally out of left field.
Right.
There's actually some history there, with these attempts to bring East African nations closer together.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, some of them go way back, even to the colonial era.
Interesting.
So it's like this idea has been simmering for a while that maybe this region is, kind of meant to be more connected.
As in, like it's part of their destiny or something.
And there's this growing feeling that a more unified East Africa would really have some muscle on the world stage, economically and politically.
Yeah.
Think about it. A single market, one voice in international affairs. the potential to attract even more investment and really boost their economies.
That makes sense, but let's be realistic. Bringing together 7 countries, especially with their own political landscapes,
Yeah,
that's a huge task.
it is.
What are some of the roadblocks Ruto might face, trying to make this happen?
Well, you've got those existing political tensions between some of the EAC members.
Right.
I mean, historical disagreements, border disputes, even just different ways of thinking about things ideologically, it can make cooperation tough.
Yeah, it's like trying to get a group of people to agree on where to eat. Everyone wants something different.
Exactly. And then there's the economic gap between the member states.
Right.
Some are further along in their development than others, and that can cause friction, especially when it comes to sharing resources or making everyone follow the same policies.
Yeah, if one country feels like it's putting in more than it's getting out, that's going to breed resentment.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's just the sheer complexity of trying to mesh 7 different legal systems, all those regulations and bureaucracies. Even with the best of intentions, things can get bogged down so easily in all the red tape and the political back and forth.
So yeah, a lot of potential pitfalls, reasons to be skeptical. But is there anything working in Ruto's favor? Any reason to think he might actually pull this off?
Well, one encouraging thing is that despite all those challenges, there does seem to be this genuine sense of shared identity starting to emerge in East Africa.
Okay.
People recognizing the potential benefits of being more connected, the economic opportunities, better security, having a stronger voice in the world.
So even with those disagreements,
Yeah.
there's this underlying feeling of we're stronger together.
Yeah, exactly. And Ruto himself is a charismatic guy, a skilled politician. He's known for connecting with people.
Okay.
If anyone can bridge those divides and get people excited about this vision, well, it might be him.
So it's not just about having a plan, it's about selling that plan, getting everyone on board with this shared future.
That's a big part of it. Leadership in a regional bloc like the EAC, it's as much about diplomacy and persuasion as it is about economics and policy.
Okay, so we've talked about Ruto's big plans, the hurdles he might face, what might help him succeed. But let's get down to brass tacks here.
Right.
What does all this mean for the average person in East Africa? How might Ruto's chairmanship actually touch their daily lives?
That's the million-dollar question. And while it's impossible to predict the future perfectly,
Of course.
we can make some educated guesses about what we might see.
All right, lay it on me. What could change for people on the ground?
Well, if Ruto is successful in boosting trade and investment, like he wants to do,
Right.
remember he's tackling those non-tariff barriers. If he can do that, we might see this ripple effect of economic growth. More businesses popping up, more jobs, maybe even lower prices as things get more efficient.
Okay, now you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
Lower prices are always welcome. What about travel? Could it get easier to move between EAC countries?
That's another area where we could see positive changes.
Oh, yeah.
If this focus on integration leads to simpler border crossings, better infrastructure, like those new railways he's been talking about,
Yeah.
it could become much easier and cheaper to travel around East Africa.
Imagine just hopping on a train and zipping across the region. No hassle. That would be amazing. But we can't forget about the potential downsides, right?
Of course not. With any big change, there are always winners and losers.
Right.
Some people might be worried about losing their jobs as businesses move or competition gets tougher.
And there's always that risk that some countries might benefit more than others, that the gains aren't shared equally.
Absolutely. Those are valid concerns. We can't just ignore them as we try to figure out how Ruto's chairmanship will play out.
So it's a mixed bag, really. Lots of potential upside, but some risks to watch out for. What about that political confederation idea? Is that really doable?
Ah, that's the big one.
It is.
It's a massive undertaking, and there's no guarantee of success. It'll depend a lot on Ruto's ability to navigate those political tensions, to bridge the economic gaps, and to convince the other leaders to buy into this project.
So it's not just about his own ambition. It's about getting everyone on the same page, working together towards a shared goal. But even if he does manage it, even if East Africa does start moving towards political unity, what would that actually look like? Would there be a single government, a single currency?
It's still early days, so a lot of it is speculation. But we can maybe get some clues by looking at other examples of regional integration.
Okay.
Like the European Union. The EU's a good one to think about. It started with economic cooperation
Right.
and gradually, over time, moved towards, deeper political ties.
Yeah.
It took decades, though. And it wasn't always easy, that's for sure.
Definitely. The EU's had its fair share of bumps in the road.
Exactly. Economic crises, disagreements over immigration, you even had countries threatening to leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if East Africa does go down this road, it's important to be realistic. It's not going to happen overnight. There will be challenges.
Okay, so let's imagine, just for a second, that they do make it happen. They form this political confederation.
Mm.
What would that look like, for the average person? How would it affect their lives?
Well, imagine being able to travel between those EAC countries without needing a visa.
Okay.
Maybe even using a single currency.
Wow.
Imagine a regional parliament where people from all across East Africa can come together and make decisions for the whole community.
That's a pretty powerful image. East Africa standing as one, a real force in the world. But even if it doesn't go that far, even if the political stuff is a long way off, Ruto's time as chair could still be really significant.
Oh, absolutely. If he can make progress on that economic integration, strengthen those bonds between countries, that alone would change East Africa, create new opportunities, boost their economies, and definitely raise their profile globally.
So many possibilities, so much potential. It'll be fascinating to see how it all unfolds.
It will. And we'll be here, keeping a close eye on it all, breaking it down for you here on the Deep Dive, making sure you have the insights you need to understand what's happening in this region. Because it's complex, it's changing fast.
So, to all our listeners out there, keep East Africa on your radar. This isn't just about politics, it's about the future of an entire region. A region with so much potential, a region that just might surprise the world. Who knows, maybe someday we'll be talking about the rise of a new global powerhouse, the United States of East Africa.
A lot to think about.
Definitely gives us a lot to consider.